Thank you so much for joining the No More Tech Summit. And if you've already been with us from before, we'd just like to remind you that if you sign in as a participant, you would not be coming up on screen. And so all your questions and answers are absolutely fine to pop through the Q&A. If what we talk about today is triggering in any shape or form, and you feel that you'd like to access support, please do reach out to the Global Directory. It will be absolutely, everything will be available there for you to click into and access. It will be there and it'll be popped up on the screen. So without further ado, I'd love to give you a sort of an overview of the session and to say a big thank you to all of our guests who I will introduce as we go on through the session. But today we are joined by experts, advocates, innovators who are all at the forefront of addressing one of the most pressing issues of our time, tech-facilitated abuse. As technology continues to grow rapidly and in such evolve, so do the forms of harassment, harm, exploitation and manipulation that victims of domestic and sexual violence and women and some men experience. In this session, we've sort of wanted to really dig into what our speakers who are at the forefront of this response think about what would basically be the strategy to end it. So we're looking for those really clear, sort of ambitious goals, bigger than potentially what we could achieve today, but what is needed to put an end to tech-facilitated gender-based violence. So without further ado, I will hand over to the fabulous Yera Hussein, whom I know has been working in this space for over 15 years. And she is the founder and the CEO of Chen, a global nonprofit that creates resources on the web to address gender-based violence. She believes in using the power of open source technology, trauma-informed design, and hope-filled framing to solve the world's pressing issues. Thank you so much, Yera, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. I'm going to share my screen with everybody and we can get started. So like Lindsay said, I'm the founder of Chen. I started 12 years ago, and I'm going to talk to you about what Chen is doing when it comes to tech-facilitated gender-based violence, or as I like to shorten it, tech abuse. Chen, for anyone interested, is the word in Urdu. It means peace of mind, and that's really at the core of what Chen does. We want to make sure that we are supporting survivors of gender-based violence across the world, and that everybody can feel, spaces of community joy and healing on the web, because it is a commons for all of us. You can see what Chen does for yourself. It's all global, it's free. Our resources are created with survivors from all around the world. We've reached more than 600,000 people, and there's so much more that we want to do. So the first way that we work on tech abuse is that we support survivors with information and understanding that they need to thrive. It's across all aspects of experiencing gender-based violence. When it comes to tech abuse, it's really about identifying, is what's happening to me, is the manipulation that I'm experiencing, is that to do with tech? And if so, how can I get out of it? How can I process what's happening to me? So we have, for instance, a guide and do-it-yourself online safety guide. We have a guide that's about manipulation, which talks about different forms of gender-based violence. But there's loads of examples of tech, things like, leaving lots of missed calls on your phone, or, on the other end, installing a tracker. So these are the kind of things that we look at, but we also do the more in-depth healing and work. So we have a platform called Bloom, which has really in-depth courses in 6 languages. And we also have a team that provides one-to-one support and on reflecting on what you learn from the courses. One of our latest courses is all around image-based abuse. It's the only course that I know of its kind that's online. And highly recommend, this one's only in English, but I highly recommend anybody who may have experienced this to actually go through it, to really get support and understanding and processing the sort of trauma of having experienced image-based abuse, and what it looks like in different cultures as well. The second way we work on tech abuse is that we actually co-create tools with survivors, not for them. So they're working with us, and we want to challenge patriarchy in all its forms together. So again, have a look at Chen's website and you can see all the different things we do. I'll give an example from one of our latest projects. So this is a feminist AI tool that we're building, and this will help survivors generate letters that sound as if a lawyer had written them. And it's really inspired by stories of survivors who say that when they talk about their abuse, nobody takes them seriously. But when their lawyer gets in touch, the same thing is treated with much more seriousness. And also the lawyer knows how to write things in a way that will get through to these broken systems. So that's the idea behind this tool. We're actually building it right now. Again, it's being co-designed with survivors. And if you're interested and being involved in this in any way, then please do get in touch, because it's being built as we speak. Number 3, we advocate for trauma-informed approaches to product design, because if products are created in such a way that there's less abuse to begin with, then the kind of scale of violence and oppression that we see would be much less. And also about what happens when that abuse happens, like how do systems react to it. So we work on these approaches again with survivors. We produce research. We are constantly also producing tools ourselves, thinking about what can we do better and putting that into practice, working with policymakers and technologists and activists and survivors to monitor how abuse is manifesting. Because the way we think about tech abuse is that it's really a more perverse and more sort of more perverse form of gender-based violence that already exists in the offline spaces. And as technology is becoming more pervasive in our lives, the distinction between online and offline isn't that much. So we have a set of trauma-informed design principles that we work through, but we also do training with our different companies and different organizations on to think about like how can we apply them to all sorts of the work that we do, whether it's creating policies, doing research, running an organization like Jen, or creating product features. We produced a research called Orbits, and this was looking at like how can, again, like these principles be applied to the policy, research, and tech design areas. So if anyone's interested in research, please do have a look. It's from 2022, but so much of it is still relevant. We also monitor what's happening in terms of generative AI. How can we be really also expanding how we think about the harms of it, and like how can we reclaim the power, because really we see the web as digital commons. And I'll end with a really exciting thing. You are one of the first people in the world to know about this, but Jen is about to announce like a new research that we're starting. And this one is about mapping what intimate means across the world and in different communities. And the reason for this is that a lot of the laws that are about image-based abuse, also called deepfake or revenge porn, which we should really bin that term, is based on having partial or full nudity. But Jen's experience says that's not true. If you're someone who wears a hijab and a picture of you is circulated or is threatened where you're not wearing hijab, that is still harmful to you. And we know from working in different parts of the world that something even as innocuous, which may seem innocuous as you standing with a boy holding hands, can be seen as proof of you, having had extramarital relations with someone, and that can really cause you grave harm. So we want to map that so that policies and sort of community guidelines at tech companies recognize that as abuse. So I'll stop there, but yeah, really interested to connect with anybody. Please do connect with Chen and me. It'd be great to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Hera. I started by saying I wouldn't comment, but actually you have, and Chen have been at the forefront of tech facilitated abuse. And I think some of the key things you're saying, which are really powerful, it's about co-creation and the fact that you are led by, global type of response, but actually that response needs to be individual to different communities and cultures and regions. And I think that's absolutely incredibly powerful. I'd love to circle back a little bit later and ask a couple more questions of some of the stuff, and very, very interested in the global approach to intimate as a concept, because that came up in our previous sessions earlier this morning. So thank you so much, Hera. So sort of moving on to our next panelist, Will Rivera. Will is the managing director of My Own Image, promoting digital safety and intimate privacy. He is committed to supporting individuals impacted by violence and fostering community resilience through innovation and client-focused approaches. Will.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having us on here and the team at Know More. Thank you for including me on these amazing leaders, amazing panelists as well. I can't believe I have to go after Hera, but I will try to do my best. So My Own Image, we are a very new nonprofit focused on fighting against tech-facilitated violence and abuse, and all the intersecting forms of violence that happens through those means of utilizing tech. And so right now, our main focus is image-based abuse. And so My Own Image was founded by Susanna Gibson, who will be having an interview shared here at 1:30. But Susanna shares her story regarding her victimization of the non-consensual distribution of her intimate images. And from that has become this amazing organization called My Own Image. And at My Own Image, we are fighting non-consensual distribution of intimate images, NDII, or image-based sexual abuse, IBSA, through state level policy. So we have developed a model policy alongside with survivors and criminal reform policy experts, where we are addressing many of these issues through our model policy. And our model policy, we're not only focusing in on just criminalization, we're actually bringing in new ways of looking at criminalization to ensure that, you know, we are not adding into issues of over criminalizations or over arrest of certain marginalized communities. And so with that being said, we have about we're about in several states. I can count 7 off the top of my head, hoping to add 3 more within the next couple of weeks. And so anyone out there who's interested in bringing our model policy to address these issues, please let me know. Happy to have a conversation. But our model policy, what it's doing is focusing on the non-consensual sharing via consent, right? We're not looking at it as intent to harass, annoy, which most laws are. So we're looking at addressing it through consent, through free speech, and also protecting content creators as well, because they need to be protected. And we have very dear friends of ours who create content, and we want to make sure that all of those in those communities are protected. And so right now, we hear a lot of conversation around deep fakes, right? AI generated images, deep fakes. But before all of those things were happening, were profound acts of non-consensual sharing of intimate images. And so these issues are continuously, there are alarming rates at this point beyond the AI generated images. And we shared last week, both on all of our socials, an exposure manifesto that we uncovered while helping a survivor. And so that exposure manifesto basically is a playbook for, I'm going to say mostly men, to expose, find, share, keep sharing, keep harming, even if it's children, and all the ways of how to enjoy this harm. And so we share this playbook so people can get a kind of a point of view of why we're doing this. It's because these images are being traded like baseball cards. We have groups of individuals, 70,000 plus individuals, in these, specified chat rooms to cause this harm. And we are hoping to stop this. And so as much as we talk about, deep fakes and AI generated images, we want to make sure that we're going back to why we started this work, is the actual sharing of real images as well, and that these real images are these sharing of real non-consensual sharing of real images are causing profound harm. It's over 90% of these images are sexually explicit. 50% of those who have been harmed by this contemplate suicide. And we want to make sure that people know that these images, yes, they're images. And yes, this is systemic organized sexual violence, and we need to address it and call it out for what it is. And so if you take a look at our socials. You can see it there. Please be mindful of what it's on there. But also you can, we're fighting back. You can take a look on our socials, and we have an email campaign where you can send a generated letter to your state lawmaker to tell them to work with organizations like us, fund organizations like us, all of these advocacy organizations as well. And so that's kind of where we're at with My Own Image, hoping to move forward and address these. Our goal is that once we can focus on all of these issues at the statewide level through our model policy, is then we can grow into addressing all the other intersecting forms of abuse in tech. So thank you all for having My Own Image, and I'll kick it back off to you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. Well, I think what you said was really, really key. And in a way, it's come up a couple of times in the earlier sessions that although technology moves increasingly faster and faster, and we have new, advancements, those that choose to be abusive are using every possible tool in their toolbox. And so even though we move on and think this is new tech, actually, we need to also recognize that what's happened before is still happening. So really, really interesting. And thank you so much for pointing that out. Great. I'm going to thank you so much, Will. I'm going to hand over to Lindsay Song, whom is she's the current Associate Program Director of the Family Law Project at Sanctuary for Families in Queens. She's also the co-chair of the New York Cyber Task Force, which is a collection of agencies, attorneys, and advocates working to end cyber abuse in all forms. Really interested in hearing from you today. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining us. And thank you again, Will, for sharing.
And thank you, Lindsay. It's lovely to be here today. As Lindsay introduced, I am Lindsay Song at Sanctuary for Families, which is New York State's largest nonprofit provider dedicated exclusively to services and advocacy on behalf of survivors of gender-based violence. And I will just say I am so grateful to be here today at this critical convening with researchers, experts, survivor leaders, and others. And shout out to my fellow panelists that we often coordinate with and support on a regular basis. I am very excited to hear about new research opportunities, have used Chains and Cyber Abuse Orbit's manual for many years. So shout out to all of our amazing panelists as well. For the last 7 years, I have been the co-chair of the New York Cyber Abuse Task Force, along with Annie Saifullah of Incendi Law. And this is a coalition of New York State-based lawyers, advocates, government representatives, survivors, and others committed to fighting technology-facilitated abuse and intimate partner violence in all its forms, which includes, but of course is not limited to, things like non-consensual intimate image abuse, also known as intimate image abuse or image-based abuse, hacking, stalking, spoofing, harassment, identity theft, impersonation, and more. And currently, the task force includes member organizations and individuals from over a dozen states, and now we have almost 400 list members. So although we are New York-based, we really encourage others. We have several international compatriots and folks that are doing this work internationally, and it's really amazing to have input from everywhere geographically, because we are unfortunately all dealing with the same types of harms. So this work on the task force grew out of my own experience as an attorney for the last almost 10 years, representing survivors of intimate partner violence and seeing firsthand the abuse that they experienced, particularly with the intersection of technology-facilitated abuse. And I'm sure that other sessions have already gone a little bit into kind of the forms of abuse that we see, but just as an example, perpetrators of intimate partner violence are increasingly using online platforms, other digital technologies to abuse, exploit, and threaten and harass victims, and really includes an array of harassment. I know already Hira and Will have already spoken about the need to move quickly in order to respond to just the new tools that are coming out, but frankly, just the creativity of abusers, because the minute that something comes out, even if it's a tool that really is useful for good, useful for connecting people and making sure that they are able to be with loved ones, it is often very easily perverted and used against them even faster than advocates, attorneys, and certainly the laws can respond to them. And I also just want to uplift and shout out what Hira was saying about the term image-based abuse and kind of addressing when we're talking about forms of image-based abuse, that even though in many countries, including in the US, and I will speak specifically for New York, that criminalizing and addressing forms of image-based abuse is very specific to intimate images and sexual images. However, that does not mean that the abuse is not broader than that. And I actually prefer the broader term image-based abuse because there are so many forms of images that can be weaponized against folks depending on their cultural and religious and community backgrounds. And so it's really important to speak to that, even if it is not criminalized, even if it is not included in the existing laws. It does not mean that it is not harassment and abusive and cannot be addressed in other ways like safety planning and potentially other litigation. Also, an important note to include that images are either, they can be what we call authentic images that are, realistic images that are actual images, but they can just as easily be what we prefer to say inauthentic images, right? You will often hear the phrase deep fake or photoshopped images, but really it's any kind of image that is inauthentic, because the idea of saying something is a real image or not, I find to be misleading. Because the realness is in the impact, right? So regardless of whether or not the image itself was a real photo, an authentic photo, the damage is still there. So I just want to highlight a couple of points in terms of advocacy that the Sanctuary for Families and the task force has done in New York and what we've seen be successful. In New York, we've been able to implement legislation on the New York City basis and also in New York State. And several lessons that we have kind of learned from that and would encourage others is, first of all, the critical importance of multiple areas of remedies for survivors of image-based abuse and technology-facilitated abuse. And in representing hundreds of survivors across family courts in New York City over the last 10 years, I've seen firsthand the need for multiple routes for remedies. And it's critical that laws include provisions that not only include criminal penalties, which are an option, but an imperfect option at best, as Will alluded to, and I'm sure others will as well. It's certainly something that many folks want to use, and frankly, it is a free access, which is more than some other like civil litigation. However, there are certainly very real negative outcomes with criminal justice options. So including family court options, including civil court options, including other ways that survivors can engage in litigation processes if they choose to do so, and including orders that can be issued from local jurisdictional courts that will prevent abusers from disseminating images, from engaging in technology-facilitated abuse. Recently in New York, in the last couple of years, we've added language to our orders of protection that require abusers, if clients ask for them, not only to refrain from disseminating intimate images, but also to refrain from remotely controlling any connected devices. So things like cars or even Ring cameras, Wi-Fi networks, AirTags. And so that can be included in orders of protection, which can be a really critical safety tool, because then if abusers do that, then clients can pursue criminal remedies or civil court enforcement for those orders. And it can be a protective factor when otherwise perhaps they would not be taken as seriously by law enforcement or have the options. An additional option, of course, is civil court options for suing for monetary damages against abusers. This is something that is a critical option. However, it often includes costs associated with that. And I'll speak a little bit later about kind of the lack of free accessible legal resources for folks, at least in the US and I imagine globally. And so the importance of lowering barriers to access to those additional remedies. 2 points about legislation: that it's important to include threats to disseminate images, and also to not exclude downstream distributors. So if an image is passed along to multiple people, some laws will not include the people that have gotten it kind of down the line, not directly from the survivor. We've seen that to be extremely problematic in New York because it makes it very difficult to prosecute or even for clients to bring those cases at all, and also makes it difficult for them to go to family court because the person that's been posting it is not necessarily their intimate partner if it was passed along from an intimate partner to a friend, to a friend, to a friend, and then posted on a site. And the same thing with threats, because threats are often as scary or intimidating or life-ruining as the actual image distribution itself, the fear and the weight of that. And speaking, Will had mentioned earlier about the emotional impact. And I've seen this firsthand, that many clients really feel suicidal. They feel extreme emotional distress about even the threats of this kind of material going viral. 2 last points: the critical enforcement piece, that there is a lack of training, a absolute bare lack of training that we've seen, because I've seen survivors turned away by law enforcement who are not aware of or don't adequately understand existing laws, and had to explain to judges and others about the nature of the laws. So it's incredibly important to inform not only survivors and the community, but also judges and advocates and law enforcement, district attorneys' offices who are in the position of moving cases forward about existing remedies. And finally, funding and support for legal advocacy and case management support for survivors. There are some new funding opportunities here in the US, which is exciting, such as the National Resource Center on Cyber Crimes Against Individuals. But the fact is that the vast majority of people that I interact with are not able to get free or cost-effective legal services for these forms of abuse, and they really are navigating these things on their own, which is why something like Chain's resource for kind of writing things in a lawyerly way, I think is so powerful, because oftentimes people are turned away if they don't have a JD behind their name or an Esquire, and that's really absolutely, awful. And so to be able to empower folks with these legal assistants and even just case managers or safety planning, tech safety clinics, which we are lucky to have in New York and a couple of other states here, it's critical that all the systems are provided with tools and resources to effectively respond to technology facilitated abuse, to protect survivors and empower them to move into lives of safety and security. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was so brilliant, really comprehensive, and covered so many aspects. I think the piece that really jumps out for me is offering that multiple different routes for survivors. And I think listening to what Shen's saying and what Will, and then the support that they offer at Shen with regards to using the advocate, which is absolutely brilliant name for it, is really, really important. Also, I think, your bit that you mentioned around education and ensuring that all people in the system of responding have the right tools and resources and education to do that effectively is really key. So thank you so much, Lindsay. I've got lots of questions to come back to when we get to the panel. Right, so sort of moving on to the next person at the moment. I'm going to move to Emma. Emma Pickering is the head of tech and economic abuse at Refuge in the UK. She is committed to specialized training and is working on a PhD evaluating the role of tech facilitated abuse in domestic homicides. At Refuge, she also manages the external partnerships and shapes legislation. So in many ways at the forefront of the response here in the UK. Emma, can I hand over to you?
Thank you, Lindsay. So I work at Refuge, and Refuge are the UK's single largest provider of domestic abuse services. And within Refuge, there is a specialist service, the Tech and Economic Service, which I oversee, which was formed in 2017. And this service was formed because we identified that there was a growing threat of harm caused by perpetrators misusing technology. We identified that perpetrators were misusing location settings, harassing calls, messages, social media platforms. And since 2017, the forms of tech abuse that we're seeing now coming through has evolved and changed. We work directly with survivors, all survivors, and we conduct tech assessments with them to make sure that they can navigate their technology safely and they can remain online and stay connected. It's really important that we don't try and disconnect people from technology. And we really push back as well when agencies such as the police might say to a survivor, the solution is to come offline, to block the perpetrator and take responsibility. We don't use that language, it's not helpful. We make sure that we try and empower survivors to become more tech savvy and understand their settings and privacy features and help support them to use technology safely. And we do that in a number of ways. But one of the key functions of our work is to ensure that anybody that is fleeing domestic abuse cannot be tracked and located via technology. Obviously, we run a number of refuges and safe accommodation services. And we want to make sure that women and children, not only in our services, but other services, they can't be tracked and have to move again repeatedly because a perpetrator has been able to locate them through the numerous different ways in which a perpetrator can identify and locate somebody. So that's why the tech assessments are crucial, to going through step by step every possible scenario and way in which somebody could locate somebody and make sure that we try and eliminate all of those options for a perpetrator. Alongside the direct client support for our survivors, which is central to all of our work, we also advocate with survivors as well. So we campaign for improved legislation and advocate when there are gaps in the law that fail to protect survivors. For instance, around AI-generated images. We also feed into Ofcom's regulation alongside the rest of the VOG sector in the UK to make sure that women and girls are a priority within the guidance, and that they're protected when they're online and they have a voice in the regulation as well. And we're part of working groups and coalitions that aim to reduce the harm caused by perpetrators weaponising technology. And some of these working groups range from Stalkerware Coalition that looks to remove all forms of stalkerware in the App Store and the Play Store. Stalkerware shouldn't exist. There's no benefits to stalkerware. And we need to make sure that we're removing all forms of stalkerware to protect survivors. We also are part of IBM's working group to ensure that product safety is at the forefront of design principles. And we also work really closely with other tech developers as well to make sure that when they're creating products, they're mitigating the risk of harm that a perpetrator could misuse that product. We've designed campaigns as well to raise awareness, and we've supported the development of storylines and documentaries to raise awareness of tech facilitated abuse. And we develop and deliver training to raise awareness, specifically to kind of police, frontline officers, digital services as well, and also healthcare settings and housing, to make sure that they understand how tech facilitated abuse can manifest and how they can respond safely to survivors. And alongside the training development, we also run digital literacy campaigns as well, and tech lending schemes, where we've gifted thousands of devices to survivors to make sure that they can utilise technology safely and stay connected. We've developed a tech safety website with detailed guides and resources, and we also host 2 digital tools. One is the digital breakup tool, which is a virtual guide that talks somebody through those things, the different forms of technology applications that you would need to review to make sure that you can stay safely disconnected from another person. We also have a home tech safety tool as well, which talks you through all the different forms of technology that could be hosted within the home and how to keep these safe. We have economic guides and resources as well, alongside the tech safety guides. And over the last few years, we've been running a partnership with our buy-and-led partners, Karma Nirvana, Gallup, Stay Safe East, Sign House and Blind Aid, to design BSL content, videos, podcasts and training materials for all of our survivors, to make sure that we're reaching as many survivors as we can, and we're not excluding anybody because we don't have resources that are accessible. We've got youth tech leads embedded across all of our services, and we have a number of tech leads and economic leads embedded across the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, because it's really important that we're not just supporting survivors that are within refuge services, that if people need support externally as well, they can also receive tech support as well. And then the next kind of steps for us, what we're looking at next, is to develop what's known as a Tech Abuse Bible. So this is a how-to guide. It's going to have everything in there, hopefully, that a survivor will potentially need, and that will be hosted on the Tech Safety website. We're also developing and advancing our tech chatbots as well, to make sure we're putting as many resources as possible there for survivors. And we're also developing an advisory group. So if there are people across the sector that are interested in learning more about our work and shaping our response and our work at Refuge, we're really keen to hear from people, because we'd like an advisory group that can help focus our priorities and look at our next strategy, which I'll be developing the next strategy this year, release for 2026, which will look at prevention, because I really want to think about how we can design some form of exit strategy. So really, our work shouldn't exist in the next 10 to 15 years. So what can we do now that looks at prevention to make sure that we're reducing the need for our service, and we don't want to create a codependency for survivors that need us. And we're going to look at continuing our work on prevention in the health and tech sector. Car tracking is a huge issue for us, so we need to do work around this area. And using our we've got lots of data, so utilising that data and feeding that into research with other researchers and leads across the sector as well, and looking at the intersection between economic and tech abuse, and making sure that our data and research really feeds into those government reports and responses, because the government in the UK have made really big announcements that they're going to tackle VOG in the next decade, and we want to make sure that tech abuse is focused as well, and a key priority.
Thank you so much, Emma. It's so lovely to hear you talk about what's going to happen next, and that dream of us, all of us who've ever worked in the violence against women and girls, domestic abuse, sexual violence sector have always wanted to be unemployed because we are no longer needed. So it's great to start thinking of it sort of from that perspective of how we move forward in the future. And that sort of echoes a little bit of that call for education and what that really looks like. Okay, great. So I'm going to hand over to Liz Dank, and then Philippus will come afterwards. So let me give the loveliness for Liz. Liz is a policy expert with almost 20 years of experience in the field of law and gender-based violence. She recently joined Uber as their senior public policy manager for women's personal safety. Liz.
Great. Hi, thank you, Lindsay. Really excited to be here today, talk about Uber's approach to safety. I am still fairly new at Uber. I've been here for about 6 months now. But one thing that's been clear to me from day one is how deeply committed Uber is to safety. It's not just a feature or a talking point, it's truly woven into everything that we do. Our mission is to create opportunity through movement, and we hear all the time how people rely on the platform to get where they need to go. It might be commuting to work or running errands or heading home after a night out. Personally, as a parent in New York City, I've relied on Uber so many times to make life just a little bit easier for me and my family. And what's always given me peace of mind is knowing that there are real safety features in place to protect users. Safety incidents on Uber are incredibly rare. 99.9% of trips and deliveries end without a serious safety incident occurring. But we know that one incident is too many. So that's why we're constantly working to improve the work that we're doing. We're listening to feedback from users. We're collaborating with experts and building new technology to enhance safety across the platform. One of the things that I really appreciate about Uber's approach is that safety tools aren't just there in the background. They're customizable so that our users can tailor them to their own preferences. I've been an Uber user for a long time before I joined the company, and I can say firsthand how valuable I found these features to be. I know that when I'm in an Uber, I can share my trip status with family or friends. I can use a PIN code to verify that I'm in the right car. I can audio record my ride, which is a newer feature that we've launched. And I know that ride check is in place, which can detect if a trip goes unusually off course or stops unexpectedly. And I know that folks will check in with me to see if everything's okay. And all of this really makes a difference in feeling safe while using the platform. And then if help is needed, our users can report issues in app, contact trained safety agents 24/7, and in some regions, use an emergency button to call emergency services directly. All of our products and policies have been informed by our close partnerships with safety experts and advocacy organizations to ensure that our work is both survivor-centered and trauma-informed. We work really closely with organizations like No More and many others to really do all of our work. So we work closely to design safety policies and features, making sure that we're centering survivors and doing that. Just to give you some examples, through our consultations and partnerships with NGOs, we've improved our reporting processes. We've integrated direct connections to NGO helplines for users who do experience harm. We partnered in 2018 with Reliance to create an industry-first framework for reporting and categorizing sexual misconduct and sexual assault in rideshare, which helped us to improve how we respond to incidents and support survivors. We also work really closely with our safety experts and advocacy partners to advocate for policies and legislation that prioritize safety. We've engaged in discussions around laws and regulations that might impact safety or survivor privacy or survivor autonomy. And then we also support community-based efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. This is one of the things that I'm super excited that I get to work on here, is that in 2017, we launched our Driving Change program, which was a $5 million commitment to develop deep partnerships with gender-based violence NGOs, to improve Uber's response to gender-based violence, and to invest in global and local prevention response initiatives. And then in 2023, just recently, we announced an additional $10 million commitment to continue to grow and expand this critical work. I manage our Driving Change program, and through the program, we've had the privilege of working with gender-based violence experts around the world and supporting local community efforts to prevent exploitation and abuse. And so these partnerships and the work through Driving Change doesn't, in addition to helping folks who might be directly impacted by harm, it also allows us to engage with experts to inform and improve Uber's overall approach to safety. One thing we know is that our work on safety is never done. We'll continue improving every day. We'll continue building new technology, enhancing and strengthening our policies, and continue focusing on deepening our collaboration with experts and the communities that we serve. Feedback is extremely important to us and a huge part of that process. We want to hear from users. We want to hear from our advocate partners so that we can keep making Uber even safer for everybody. And I'm really excited that I'm here today and that I get to keep pushing this work forward at Uber. And I'm looking forward to learning from you all today and sharing more about the work that we're doing here. So I'll pass it back over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Liz, for, coming in and speaking on the work that Uber has done. And, we've at No More have worked with Uber from those early days in 2016, 2017. And interestingly, we have, had really great discussions about safety and the impact and being able to support sort of the work around training. And I think it really answers to that call that many of our earlier panelists in the day have said about how do we do things in a collaborative way? How do we work together on the platforms that we all now so intrinsically depend on? Our life depends on being able to grab a ride from an app, and knowing that we can trust it is incredibly important. So thank you so much, Liz. More questions when we get to the panel, please. But last panelist to offer their presentation and sort of thoughts will be Philippos Petros. And Philippos has 20 years of experience in the humanitarian sector with a focus on gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive rights, and domestic violence or abuse. He has been spearheading the SPHR project at Plan International in Ethiopia and providing technical support in different African regions. So we're here. So Philippos' objectives and hopes for the future of what good could look like.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for this warm welcome and then introduction. Apologies for being late because of the externalities around here. Africa, we are just complaining and blaming externalities and thank you so much. I'm just leading the SRHR sector at the Plan International in Ethiopia. GVB is also under my portfolio. Actually, I've been working here with Plan International Ethiopia some 5 years ago. So this is an organization which I love most, I can say. But my experience, as you mentioned, goes beyond 20 years. I'm passionate about SRHR because GVB is falling under protection and the health and the legal piece as well. Is the country with over 120 million population, 50% of over 50% just the population female. What we do is protection from violence is our priority. SRHR is another priority. Education is key, and then we also focus on economic empowerment as well. When we are dealing with GVB or critical in Ethiopia, as you know, this is patriarchal society where male dominance and masculinity is a bit challenging. Plan International Ethiopia is operating in over 80 countries across the world. Then in Ethiopia, we are operating in almost all regions except some 2. What we are doing is more of applying socio-ecological model and then survivor center approach. As you know, you may hear that Plan International is feminist organization as well. We are focusing on girls and women's rights. So we are applying rights-based approach, feminist approach, survivor center approach, so holistic approach. And our approach also entails evidence-based. But the challenge is that domestic violence and the GVB, there is no evidence. It's very difficult. As you know, no evidence doesn't mean that there is no problem. I'm supporting those development program in the humanitarian, and then violence is very triple, I can say quadruple in humanitarian setting. And then demand side gaps, capacity gaps, building the local capacity, because plan is working either direct implementer or implementing through local CSOs. So in Ethiopia, there are more than 5,000 NGOs, of which 3,000 plus are local. So they need to be supported. And we focus on women-led CSOs, youth-led CSOs. We build their capacity because they are within the community. The intention is to own it, to scale up and sustain the violence against children and women. Another one is the supply side. That is always challenging to us. The government is asking us don't to focus too much on demand side. We can do on that, but supply side and demand side is very critical. There is big challenge around here. So supply side service facilities are not providing comprehensive service for violent, the victims. In that case, we are supporting service providers. Particularly in Ethiopia, there are more than 70 one-stop centers, of which I think 30 are being supported by Plan International and other like-minded organizations who are working with very vibrant like-minded international organizations. No need to mention all of them, but our focus is localization. We have country strategy which aligns with the global standards, country policies and the laws. I'll come back to the laws because laws are good on the ground, on the book, but they are not good on paper. Apologies for mentioning that. I don't know how it is going on the other side, but we are so lucky for having, professionals from law field. They are freely supporting the survivors in one-stop centers as well. So one-stop centers that we are supporting are actually funded by government and the donors. As you know, the issue of donor is shrinking now. And then so we are trying to localize it because projects stay for short period of time. And then that's why we are just handovering some of the tools, the skills, the knowledge to the local community. And then we are also working with the vulnerable group, like children. In some areas like FGM is more than 96%. The body autonomy is very serious challenge around here, particularly in rural areas. Over 82% of the country is populated with people living in rural areas. So our focus is on hard to reach area, conflict affected areas, IDPs, refugee camps, and the like. So we are applying holistic approach, particularly survivor centered approach, but there are still challenges. The problem is that there are tools, there are policies and the like, but the implementation is a big challenge. That is one point. I will have 3 asks for each of us here, but the most important point I want to also mention is that we are also trying to create enabling environment. Without enabling environment, it is very difficult so that local government cannot take it up to eradication of violence. Most of the time, male dominance is, as mentioned, is common, and then beating a wife, friend, partner, spouse is considered as normal. So we conduct social norm analysis, and then we do this with our partners and with African and the global hub team because Plan International is a member of several clusters and the networks working in the country as well. The country has a strategy, the EVV strategy and the policy and the like. As I mentioned, it is not because of the existence or absence of the policy, but the implementation capacity. There is very big capacity shortage. The other issue is that technology, digitization is a serious problem now. It's coming, but it has gotten less attention. Even in our strategy, we have clearly articulated that, but we didn't work very well around that. That's why I'm trying to escalate this. How can we collaborate more to address, those challenges? Because everyone is almost dependent and addicted with, technology, digitization. Even if it has constructive advantage, but it has also several destructive aspects. So it needs to be controlled and managed. 2 days ago, I was just meeting with Ministry of Education and the Health Ministry when we are developing a roadmap for teenage pregnancy. The ministry said that we are happy to, mainstream these things in the school curriculum. What about the out-of-school ones? Because we are working on girls' rights, but it is not well tailored in the existing school system. It is not well addressed by informal structure. The traditional leaders, councils of faith leaders, and the CBOs, the youth-led organizations, they are critical for us. So that is why I am saying that Plan International is working localization is critical for us. Some of the one-stop centers, I can mention that some of them even supporting 2,800 survivors. Some of them are very key in the months. Some of them are male and then boys. The attention for boys and the men is even not that much, clear for implementing partners as well. So it needs more attention. Male engagement is critical. Yes, we have tools, protocols, but it needs more collaboration. So we need to share the vision, how to end the violence. It has been there for several times, even before we come into this land. So what are the approaches? What can we innovate? So that part is missing. So Plan International is interested. Child marriage is very common in the country. Being arranged by parents, that's violation. Circumcision is common. But circumcision in some part of Ethiopia is being conducted within 7 days and within 8 days. And the religious people consider that it's normal. Like the Sunnah, they consider men are cut. Why we should not cut, women organs? So they consider that it is normal. So such kind of things need to be working with religious people, traditional leaders, clan leaders. So Plan International is working with these leaders. The other most important point is that investment is almost not adequate with the reality on the ground. So there is lack of investment around this. So it is good to also advance the duty bearers, particularly government, should have adequate investment that should sufficiently address women's and girls' empowerment and resilience. It is also good to research on the negative and the positive consequences of technology. So GVV and the digital is critical for us. Can we just adequately invest, find out solution? There are laws, there are policies, but laws and the policies we have are outdated. And they are almost rigid, and they are also not efficient. The cases are just staying for a long time, but people are suffering a lot. There are several fistula cases, but still the law requires evidence. I need some kind of advice and insight from other countries and experience around here as well. It is not only the existence of law, but the root causes are not well addressed. So tackling harmful practice is critical. Tackling gender inequality is critical. Poverty is critical. Household poverty is critical. So justice should be ensured for. And the curricular integration, the co-curricular integration is critical for us. We are working with the Ministry of Education, but it is not adequate and sufficient. So let us create the community of practice and let us join hand and go together. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Philippos. That was really, really helpful. And I think you touched on something which was two pieces that really sort of stood out. One of them was that if we are going to invest in education, we need to think about not only investigate education from those who could be a victim of this harm, but also those that could perpetrate it. And I think then sort of the other piece that was incredibly interesting was, when we're talking about tech facilitated abuse, we're coming to it from a sort of our own lenses, our own moments. So if you're working in the violence against women and girls space, you're probably responding to it as a part of stalking, harassment and harm. But actually, if you're working sort of in a slightly harmful practices way, like you mentioned with FGM, there's a whole different sphere of, of what that looks and that feels like. And sort of really echoing what sort of with Hera was saying from Chen was that if we don't have the right collective language that is representative in our legislation, then how do we identify it as such? Okay, we have a short amount of time, as Hera kindly predicted in the beginning. 2 questions. So I'm going to split our beautiful panel into 2 parts. So for Lindsay, Emma and Liz. So we've chatted a lot. You guys have brought forward such brilliant examples of the work that you're doing individually. And you've also sort of been able to allude to how you're working collaboratively in different spaces, different type of things. But in this is our aspirational moment. In real terms, what do you think it would take for us to basically bring together the researchers, policymakers, and advocates to collaborate in a way that is effective and sort of singular in that place? We've got an opportunity where we can connect now using the tech that's available to us, but what would it mean? Lindsay, you've achieved part of it through your task group and the people on that thing, but how and what would it mean if we could come together to offer a response? I'm going to offer this out to Hera first, and then Lindsay, and then Liz, if that works. Emma, sorry. Yes, I'm confused. Hera, you jump in there. I've messed up my panels, but you jump in, Hera.
Okay, Emma gets to answer my question. I think we're all doing that to some extent really well right now, which is that there is really cross-border collaboration happening. We also have more tech companies that are working with survivors and civil society. Whereas I think if that kind of collaboration had happened when the tech was being developed, we would have seen a lot of prevention of harm. So late, but it's happening. And I think in terms of the real momentum being around, tech abuse, that is also, we're seeing real government action there too. So I think there's lots of promising things that are happening. But what will be, I think, important is that we make sure that we have not just the same players in all those same spaces. We are really and truly thinking about like who are we including and what perspectives are we missing, and really this like embrace this like idea of plurality, and like how can we have plurality in both the way we talk about these issues, who we get involved, and then how can we come together to take action. I think one thing that's the unpopular thing to say is that there's we may all be coming at the same problems from different like lenses and different like pressures and like incentives. But if we're all motivated to act on it, then we should really be, for me, it's really important to be action oriented, because there's just no time to waste, So I would, really think that all these collaborations and all these like opportunities that we have, how can we like really mobilize all of our resources to, for action for survivors? That's what feels like maybe it's not missing, but I feel like that's always like my concern or my hope, is that we turn towards action.
I love that, because we can chat and chat and chat, but actually turning it into actionable things is really important. Emma, and then I'll jump to Lindsay. Sorry, Lindsay.
Thank you. I think echoing what Hera was just saying there around action is really important. I think sharing information is really key as well, because I think a lot of the time there's really great things happening in different areas, but I think communication's probably not always the most effective. And I think we need to try and find a way to globally share information and be able to utilize research, and there'll be key areas of expertise as well that we could kind of dip into, maybe like a global research folder or shared drive or something that would work, where we can share information. We're all responsible for updating the content, and there's a two-way kind of movement of putting in and sharing as well, because I think that's key. But also funding as well. I think we need to mention that we are in a funding crisis, the Borg sector. We're chronically underfunded, which results in us spending far too much time looking at fundraising opportunities and trying to evidence our worth to sectors. And I think that's really difficult when we want to just focus on working with survivors and helping provide resources, information for survivors that are helpful and beneficial. So I think funding is one, and then shared information and collaboration.
Love that. Thanks so much. Lindsay, your thoughts?
Yes, I think I echo everything everyone has said. And I think spaces like this are perfect, because I know that over the years, like I've collaborated with many folks on this panel and others, and just growing our connections, where if I have clients that are international and global, and I know about the great resources that Jane has on the website, or I know about my own image, or I have a client that may benefit from tech safety and at a tech company or a services company like Uber, it's really fantastic to be able to create and manage these partnerships, and having convenings both in person and virtually globally, in order to make these connections and just like really continue to talk to each other, because cultivating relationships, I think, is the one of the biggest things that we can do for free, internationally, cheaply, easily, and it's no substitute for the funding, as Emma noted, that is desperately needed. But it is, kind of our in-between as someone who works at a nonprofit too. We're scrappy and we do what we can to connect with others, and I think continuing to do that has really, I've seen move things forward, at least in New York, in small levels on legislative change advocacy, and then just really creating a powerful network for survivors to be able to reach out to, and knowing where to send people.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I think you're right. I think there's golden opportunities to share information, to collaborate, to be able to put it all into a way so that we can, you know, borrow from each other and build on each other at the time where, you know, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is our funding. If you're from an NGO, and how that's sort of challenging, if you're trying to sort of get funding for a particular project, how do you share that? But something for the NGO sort of sector, along with our funders, to really dig into and think differently, I think would really make the difference. Okay, so splitting the panel again, this time a little bit better. Will, Liz, and Philippus. All of our panelists are from completely sort of different backgrounds. They've worked in different spaces. They have different lived experiences. I suppose, like, how can we collaborate better to ensure that we have a more clearer, more thorough, more understood view of the lived experiences of different people from different parts of the world? Big question, I know, and then I'll extend both out to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I think not only big but difficult questions. Yeah, always, you know, the how part is very critical. And thank you for this inspirational. And you know, actually, I will just escalate 1 or 2 points, but other this great, you know, panelists can also subscribe to what I say. Applying to the context of the adaptation recommendations from the panelists, our part is let us be committed and do not tolerate, you know, this violence. Whatever evidence do we have, let us use that evidence and then invest on at least the existing evidence. Investment. Investment could be, may not necessarily be monetary, but in humanitarian setting in the countries like Africa, it is serious. So investment is critical. So without tool, there are policies, there are laws. You cannot translate those laws and the policies to tangible results without money and investment. So investment, government should be accountable. And every community and the government should allocate certain amount of money or euro or dollar to save the lives of the survivors. That is the point. Most important. That is the whole part. So tools, particularly dollar or euro, has some solutions, is critical. The other one is in context, understand the context. America is not Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not Canada. Canada is not Japan. So understanding context is very important, because in our case, even women themselves consider as violence is normal, even educated ones. So work, invest on girls, women, invest on them and change their attitude first. So we need to have tailored, you know, curriculum to invest on the women themselves. They have to shout out. So let us advance their agency, invest on them through curriculum. If they're out of school, let us have out of school curriculum or tailor-made, you know, life skills tools that work somewhere. So it is good to also learn and share experience from others. That's the most important thing. The other one is, I have 1 point here. You know, violence against women and girls costs the global economy, and it also estimates up to 1.5 trillion per year. This is the evidence I have presented this last year for the parliament. So violence, those people could also lose up to 4% of their GDP. Let us find out exact economic terms and the monetary terms, so that this costs every country. So the aggregate cost of domestic violence for Ethiopia is more than $1.3 billion. So that means what? Many of the violence are preventable. We are good in prevention. And prevention is a bit less costly than, you know, response. Let us invest more on response as well, because there are several, you know, survivors suffering in the IDPs, the refugees, and the like. So problems in Africa become problem in the UK, in Europe, in Asia. So let us have a contextualized, tailor-made, you know, approach of investment and the collaboration. Let us have shared values based on evidence. That is something that we share over to you.
Thank you so Philippa. Thank you so much for that. It's really, really insightful. And it actually incredibly important. I know that you've stressed investment, but I think when we talk about investment, we need to think of it from a whole global approach, that you can't only invest in particular regions or areas, that everybody in every region requires that level of investment. Really, really interesting. Liz, you've done extensive work via Uber and trying to encompass sort of the different lived experiences of others. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. So I think first I would echo everything everyone said already on this panel, on this question and the question right before. Great points that everyone raised. And I was like, yes, yes, yes to everything everyone was saying. I think that I wanted to talk about understanding regional context and understanding the ways that violence and gender-based violence might show up in different regions of the world. I think is a really important piece of this work. For us at Uber through Driving Change and our grant program through that, we've partnered with experts in around the world to help us to better understand that context and make sure that our products and features that we're launching in different regions are really responsive to the needs of those communities and populations, so that while we have a global company and a global approach, we're able to think about the local impact and really work with both our local regional teams and the NGOs that we partner with through Driving Change in those regions to really understand how we can support survivors, how we can prevent and mitigate harm, and what our response should look like. I'll also just say, though, that when thinking about gender-based violence as a global issue, though, there are some issues that kind of apply across regions. And I think that's where we've seen some really impactful work that we've done with our advocate partners, particularly around legislation that kind of goes to the heart of some foundational issues that around survivor support. And so we've worked with NGOs to respond to legislation that, while often well-intentioned, may jeopardize survivor privacy or autonomy. It's included, for example, proposals for ride-sharing companies to mandatorily report sexual abuse to law enforcement, or when earners are deactivated from the platform, requiring that there be disclosures about safety incidents that occurred with sensitive information or materials. So these are times that we've worked really closely with our advocate partners to be able to have conversations and address this legislation, for example, that kind of gets to the core issues around survivor privacy and autonomy.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was really, really appreciated. Last but not least, Will, would you like to respond or answer that question?
Yeah, we can cut it off if you want to.
No,
okay.
just yeah, everyone
All
gets
right. Well, I just want to really quick echo everything that they said. The panelists completely agree with everything. Just really quick highlights is, for me, doing this work on a global issue, the most important thing is put survivors first. Simple as that, period. Like, if you're developing tech, developing policies, you can't sit in a room without a survivor or having that survivor input. Survivors should be there from the beginning, having that discussion at the jump before you even deploy a website, deploy protocols, deploy the program. Survivors need to be at that discussion from the beginning. Pay survivors for their help and assistance as well. I'm sure many of us can agree is, survivors are not compensated or asked to do things without compensation. Pay the survivors. And then on the global issue, there are many survivors doing amazing products. I mean, there's Certified AI from Melissa Hutchins, Alecto AI with Breeze and Andrea. I mean, Hera's programming as well. There's so many amazing women who are developing very good tech to protect, violence against women, or to end violence against women. Pay them, fund them. Venture capitalists out there, fund women-led initiatives. I mean, Cindy Gallup, love her, listen to her, pay all these women to develop their tech.
What an incredible way to sort of end that. But actually, I would love to just ask Kira if you'd like to comment on that last question. I know that Chen has done exceptional work around ensuring that all of their products, tools, and resources are meeting the needs of individual communities. And part of that work has been spearheaded by the survivors and those that have worked with them. So I'll extend to Kira and then we'll Kira.
I guess everybody's talked about like why it's important. So I'll talk about how, just quickly about how we do it. We do it because we, survivors are part of our volunteers, our staff, our contractors, and especially with our volunteers, our volunteers change every few months. So we never have the same pool of survivors, which ensures that we're always getting fresh, different perspectives. And they're involved from start to finish through everything that we do, all the way from the organizational strategy to and then sometimes we'll go out when we know that we have our own community isn't, we need to go beyond that, then we'll go beyond that as well. So we really try to think about survivors not as a monolith, but as a really diverse group of people who will disagree with each other, and that's fine. And that's where our role comes in as an organization convener, to sort of take what's most useful from it and apply it to our work.
Thank you so much, Kira. Thank you so much. It's a great way of sort of explaining it. And also the other piece that I just want to say before I thank everybody is that if you are inviting survivors into the space around technology, just recognize that not everybody is speaking the same tech savvy language that your group of people who are developing are, and that actually the acronyms and the terminologies can be quite isolating and create that challenge and that barrier. So we've reached the end of today's session. I just want to say a massive thank you for our incredible panelists. They've brought forward some really, really, really clear sort of goals for us to work towards, and namely the fact that we need to improve the education around tech facilitated abuse. We need to ensure that if we're speaking to both those who are perpetrating and those that are enduring tech facilitated abuse, that we need strong, structured investment into the sector and the response, and actually that we are responding as those in the NGO space quite suddenly to some changes that are happening. We're doing it, as Lindsay sort of mentioned, as we've always done in the NGO space, which is with whatever tools and resources we can muster in the minute, because we want to meet the need, but investment is key. And I think, really honing into the fact that the world is massive, it's huge. And although it feels quite small sometimes where you enter an online space and you connect, that actually in that we also have to consider that our online spaces are safe for everybody, and that we are listening to some of the challenges from different perspectives of using it. So thank you so much for everyone that joined. The only thing that I would like to ask was one question that popped up, which for Emma, if you had mentioned with regards to the advisory board, how can people get in touch with you? We've got loads of people desperate to join. So if you don't mind mentioning that, and then I'll say a great big thank you. And if you are staying on for the next session, please just join. But Emma, please finish by telling us where.
Thank you. I did pop something in the chat, but just for those that didn't see that. So we are developing the job descriptions for the chair and the advisory panel at the moment, and we will be advertising those soon. The best place to look is the Tech Safety website. So that's www.refugetechsafety.org, and you'll be able to find the advert there and follow the information, sign up to the newsletter and receive further information from us that way.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you for everyone that joined. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll see you again soon.